The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. Henrietta Lacks was diagnosed with cervical cancer and went to Johns Hopkins for radium treatment. While she was in surgery, it was requested that Dr. George Guy had a bit of the tumor for culturing. These cells were put in a test tube and labeled HeLa for the first two letters of the first and last name of the patient. After 2 treatments of radiation, the tumor shrunk and eventually disappeared. 3 weeks later, the tumors started to reappear throughout her body. By September, her body was almost entirely filled with tumors. She died on October 4th, 1951. HeLa cells became the first living cells shipped through the mail. The Tuskegee Institute opened the HeLa factory, which supplied cells to laboratories and researchers and operated as a non-profit. The polio vaccine was discovered using the HeLa cells at the Tuskegee Institute. HeLa cells became the first cells ever cloned, which was important because scientists could now easily duplicate experiments. Then, HeLa was introduced to the public as Helen Lane in the Minneapolis Star. Dr. Chester Southam began to conduct experiments on soldiers without consent, whether or not injections of HeLa cells would cause cancer. Then, the term informed consent first appears in court documents. HeLa cells created the first animal-human hybrid cells by being fused with mouse cells. At a conference on cell tissue and organ culture, Dr. Stanley Gartler proposed that HeLa cells had contaminated numerous cell lines and that the research done with HeLa cells should be halted until what was called the HeLa bomb was sorted out. In the journal Obstetrics and Gynecology, Dr. Guy was paid tribute for his research with HeLa. Diagnostics were corrected, as well as the identification of HeLa. Henrietta Lacks was correctly identified in print for the first time ever. To help solve HeLa contamination, a group of researchers working on the Human Genome Project pointed out it could all be sorted out if they found genetic markers specific to Henrietta, but they would need immediate family to give samples of their DNA to compare theirs to Henrietta. So, Day Lacks, Henrietta's husband, Lawrence Lacks, Sonny Lacks, and Deborah Lacks went to Johns Hopkins to get their blood drawn. The journalist Michael Rogers published an article about HeLa and the Lacks family in Rolling Stone. The Lacks family learned for the first time that Henrietta's cells had been commercialized. After the identity of HeLa was known, portions of Henrietta's medical records were published without her family's knowledge or consent. Now, how do Henrietta Lacks, all these scientists, bioethical situations, and catastrophes apply to this year's AP Biology class? Well, remember the HeLa bomb? Knowing a specific genetic marker in the HeLa cells helped Dr. Gartler uncover the contamination problem so it could be stopped. But in order to stop it, knowledge of family history and DNA would be needed, which is why the Lacks family gave blood to researchers from the Human Genome Project. Because DNA was collected, the family and other people would have better knowledge of their health and treat themselves correctly. And Dr. Gartler only found G6PD because of a test that searched for genetic markers that expressed themselves in a specific way. When Henrietta's tumor cells were first collected, they were given an appropriate living environment. The cells were in culture medium, which contained food for energy to grow and reproduce. The test tubes they were contained in were being moved constantly to simulate blood circulation near the cells, so the cells could grow and reproduce more easily outside the human body. Lastly, as the HeLa cells reproduced and grew, they were exposed to changing environments while scientists experimented on them and conducted their research. The cells continued to live, grow, and reproduce, but learned and adapted as well. The HeLa cells responded to these changes by evolving. The evolutions were passed down onto their daughter cells, who were also exposed to change and responded to it. Much evolution occurred from the original HeLa cells to even just a few generations down. Henrietta Lacks and the life of her cells apply to biology and the many ideas and understandings we will cover throughout the year.